Okay, so the new year is upon us, and our gift to you is Paul Dehner Jr. of the Cincinnati Enquirer.
I'm a gift.
Just like Marvin Lewis says, new team, new season, new year. So we'll talk about the new year, but first, this has been quite a week for you guys, for us. Chris Cooley sent this whole thing in a tailspin talking about Marvin Lewis and all these rumors. Not real reporting, we know that, but this has been a very unique week because every year it's different talking about Marvin and what might happen. This one was a bit different.
Yeah, I mean, things are said this time of year. Yeah. Everybody starts speculating when your team struggles, and you're a guy that's been around and has the past that Marvin has without a playoff win, and it's always gonna be speculation. I do think that's the interesting part of this year is I think we thought it had been put to bed. I mean, Marvin said to our columnist Paul Doherty a couple weeks ago, "I'm coming back next year if asked," and we know that Mike was going to ask him to come back. So to me, this situation was already put to bed. Well, then it suddenly gets rustled back up with things like this, and you're forced to address them. And I guess it's all over and done now. It was a little clunky in the way that the whole thing came out, but we know that Marvin's going to be back next year, and hopefully we all move on from that topic now.
And you have floated out the idea to us, not that Marvin was going to retire this year or next year, but you thought that before he's pushed out the door, his first option may be retiring at some point instead of being floated to another team somewhere.
Well, I mean, he's floated that out. I mean, we know about the Hugh Jackson scenario where it was brought up to him to possibly be a coach in waiting if he would have stayed last year and Marvin then walk away. So it was the first time we'd heard about sort of an expiration date or the talk of retirement. And I just think that's something that certainly is now on the table a little bit more for him going forward. Now, when that is, I don't know, but I mean, it's something that I think he's going to consider. And this team has to know what their plan would be going forward if and when that were to happen.
I joked about Marvin's comments, the new team, new season, new year. He said that way back in week 2, talking about the Steelers. But talking about the offseason, this team doesn't need to completely reform itself like it did in 2011, completely change who they are, but some areas do need to be addressed. What are some of the most glaring areas they need to address in the offseason?
Well, I think they need to figure out the offensive line, obviously. I mean, that was a big issue this year. I mean, Andy Dalton, we did our piece with Pro Football Focus this week, and Andy Dalton had 50 more dropbacks under pressure this year than the previous year, from 125 to 175. And didn't deal well with him a lot of times because they were coming almost as free runners a lot. The issue with Cedric Ogbuehi at right tackle obviously blew up in their face. I don't know that you can feel confident putting him at left tackle next year. Andrew Whitworth is a free agent. Kevin Zeitler is a free agent. Can Jake Fisher be the answer at right tackle? Maybe you hope so. You've seen maybe a decent foundation thus far, but that's not sure. There's just a lot of uncertainty there. And I mentioned Kevin Zeitler. He is going to be in high demand on the market. I mean, he was a top 10 guard coming off a great season. He's going to get a big contract. Is this team willing to pay him? To me, how that whole area falls is going to be one of the most interesting developments. The one thing that is known is they've got to get better there because they weren't good enough on the line this season.
Yeah, and last year, Marvin Jones, he left last year. Most new. Reggie Nelson, 3 big losses. Marvin said this team would be okay. They weren't so much this year, and that may not be a direct result from that. But free agency-wise, who are 1 or 2 guys they have to lock up in your mind this season?
Well, I think Andrew Whitworth. It's crazy to say, this 35-year-old left tackle, they've got to go.
Yeah.
But I think he's played so well, and eventually the end is going to come. I mean, Father Time gets everybody. But he's played well enough to this point that I think that he's got to be at the top of your priority because you just haven't seen enough where you could feel confident giving the job to Cedric Ogbuehi. Zeitler, Kirkpatrick, so out of those 3, are you ready to hand over the cornerback job to Darqueze Dennard? We haven't seen him hardly play the outside press corner yet. He's mostly played nickel. Outside press corner is what he played at Michigan State. It's why they drafted him in the first round where they did, but he hasn't played there a whole lot. If they're willing to give that over to him and to William Jackson III, speaking of guys we don't know much about, who they drafted in the first round and was on injured reserve all year. So how that plays out, those are their top 3, and I think everything else will pretty much go from there.
Looking at Jeremy Hill, are we back to the spot again where the Bengals need to look at a running back earlier on in the draft?
Yes. I don't know, early on, whenever, at some point. They're going to have a lot of picks, and it's a deep draft for running backs.
Right.
So I think this is the year because, A, will Rex Burkhead be back? Probably not. Not because the Bengals
Yeah.
wouldn't have interest, but he's going to want to go somewhere there's definitely
Right.
opportunity, and I don't think you can guarantee that here. Giovanni Bernard is coming off an ACL. You assume he's going to be healthy. You've got Hill going into the last year of his contract, and Cedric Pearman is a free agent. Running back needs to be a young position. It is a young position in this league. And when you have the opportunity to go in the mid-rounds and get a young running back, bring him in, you can have a year where he's part of the mix with Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard and what else, and maybe he ascends. I mean, we saw what happened with Jeremy Hill in 2014 in his rookie year when he took over this team basically and became a team MVP. To me, it's time for that position to start to cycle. It seems to match between the draft and where this team is at. And you can only pay so many running backs second contracts. It doesn't happen often. It's very rare in this league. They've already done it to Giovanni Bernard. It would be hard to see them doing it for Jeremy Hill next year.
Bit of an odd season as far as how things played out for A.J. Green. Obviously a Pro Bowl season, again, a sixth straight year. And he was, put on the shelf at the end of the season for good reason, I think, as far as his future goes. I don't know so much that A.J. Green was happy about how things played out. Is there any kind of separation between A.J. and the organization right now?
I don't think so. I mean, they put $60 million to keep that bridge pretty well fortified. Yeah. I mean, A.J. Green is going to be here. He is a big part of the organization. Was he happy with the way things went down? No. He wanted to come back, and he certainly didn't want to have to find out when he was in Houston. I don't think that's a secret. Off seasons are a long time, and it's a lot of time for everybody whose maybe feelings got hurt or things were said to figure it out, let it go, and come back. In the long run, I don't think it's a big deal. I'm sure AJ is frustrated right now because, I mean, he used really strong words every time we talked to him about why he wanted to come back, despite the fact that the Bengals would possibly be out of it. He called it cowardly if you bail on your team at the end of a season just because it's not going well, and he feels it's very important to set that message. He took ownership over this team more than ever before.
Yeah.
And so I think to him, he didn't want it to feel or look like in any way that he was bailing on a team that he takes a lot of ownership over, and that's where some of that came from. But like I said, it's a long off season. By the time next year comes, I don't think anybody will even really remember how this went down.
Final thought for me, Marvin Lewis, just 4 losing seasons in 14 years. Everything says the Bengals will bounce back. Will they bounce back in 17?
I don't think you can say that for sure either direction today because, A, we haven't even finished 16, and B, so much will happen over the course of the offseason. I mean, when you talk about double-digit free agents, a few of the guys that we've mentioned, 11 picks in the draft when they get 4 comp picks as well, and who knows what will happen with A.J. McCarron. There's a possibility of it. There's just a lot that will happen. The one thing that we know that we learned from 16 is it wasn't good enough. And typically when that happens, an older roster gets younger. And so I expect there to be a decent amount of turnover with some of the more veteran guys on this team and a little bit more youth to come in to try to bring in some new faces. When that happens, you don't know what's going to happen. We talked a whole lot about change last offseason, right?
Yeah. About
all the guys that came and went, new coaches, and that ended up being a big part of the reason they struggled, particularly early in the year.
Yeah.
There's a possibility that could be part of what happens next year. Who knows? You really can't say in this league because year to year, look at Carolina and Denver, who are going to be sitting home watching just like the Bengals are. You really don't know how it's going to play out.
That is a seasoned vet. No bold prediction, no backlash on Twitter.
No, well, there will be backlash.
There's going to be backlash.
There's always outrage, Jeremy.
Hey,
always.
But there's a proposal. Maybe we can edit on Twitter. I've heard this recently.
Oh, possible.
We can edit tweets. A lot less backlash for guys like you and I, especially you.
I don't want the angry people to be able to change what they said. I want it on the record.
Paul, thanks, man.
No problem.
Happy New Year.